Call into order the Tuesday, December 2nd, 2014 meeting of the Township of South Orange Village Board of Adjustment. May we have a roll call?
Yes, Mr. DeScalo.
Yes.
Mr. Polipiano.
Yes.
Mr. Reeves.
Here.
Mr. Semper.
Here.
Mr. Adler.
Yes.
And Mr. Breen.
Here.
Pursuant to Section 5, Chapter 231, PL 1975, this is to state for the record that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public by posting and maintaining the annual notice of regular meetings on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by publishing the annual notice of regular meetings for 2014 in the December 2013 edition of the South Orange Maplewood News Record, and by filing said notice in the office of the village clerk. Okay, let me run down the order of business. We're going to review the minutes from two meetings. Then we're going to hopefully adopt the resolution for the meeting dates for 2015. Then we're going to hear singular tonight, which is the main business at hand. And then we're going to go into closed session. Now, Mr. Dwyer, may we adjourn the meeting and then go into closed session, or do we have to keep the meeting open? Or does it even matter?
Unless you have any business coming afterwards. Normally you do keep it open, go in close, add close, and then close the meeting.
Okay, so then that's what we'll do then. We'll keep the meeting open after, of course, we hear singular, and we'll talk about, what is it, the Betts litigation, as well as the, what? O'Leary litigation. Okay. All right, so let's move on first to the approval of the minutes. The first one that we'll discuss is Tuesday, August 5th. Does anybody have any comments about that? Any comments? Okay, so I make a motion that we approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
A second.
And Mr. Adler.
I can.
This is the meeting on Tuesday, August 5th.
Yeah, okay.
She's calling for approval.
Oh, yes.
Mrs. DeScalo.
Yes.
And Mr. Reeves.
Yes. Okay, so next we look at Tuesday, September 2nd. This is a regular meeting. The minutes for that. And this involved the Turner application, or the appeal from the HPC. And it also involved Seton Hall in its last hearing before us. They were nice, concise minutes. I don't have a problem with it. Anything in there. Does anybody else have any comments? Can I make a motion to accept the minutes as written?
I'll second.
Okay. Mr. Adler.
Yes.
Mr. DeScalo.
Yes.
Mr. Polipiano.
Yes.
And Mr. Reeves.
Yes. And then we move on to the third minutes, and that's September 30th, 2014. And this was singular, their first hearing before us. And I added one suggestion there that is in red, if you read it, and I'll just read it right here. I wanted it clear in there what the reason why we're having a second meeting, and I wrote in there, the board members expressed particular concern over the additional height variance requested by the applicant. The members asked whether the applicant could place the antennae in such a way as to not worsen the existing height variance. Other than that, I accepted it. Somebody made some capitalization corrections, but other than that, the minutes are concise, and I think they're appropriate. Any questions about them?
No, I move that we accept those.
All right, may we have a second?
And I'll second again.
And Mr. Adler.
Yes.
Mr. Reeves.
Yes.
Mr. Polipiano.
Yes.
And Mrs. DeScalo.
Yes.
Thank you. So we now move on to the resolution for the meeting dates for 2015. We received this today from Ms. Davis. You see here, who hasn't seen this? Have you all seen it?
I haven't seen it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. It's the usual first Tuesday of most of the months, except there is a Wednesday meeting in May. What's the reason for that?
SOPAC was not available for us on that Tuesday, so they told me Wednesday was the next available day.
Okay. And all but one are in the main stage. There's one that's scheduled for the loft, which is where we are now. And so we don't have to worry about that November, that Tuesday being an election day?
No, Village Hall will be open.
Okay. Okay, so
I will likely have a conflict on that Wednesday.
on this Wednesday, would you be able to, do we have anybody contracted to,
We don't have anybody contracted, but there is someone
who could stand in for you?
who can stand in for me.
Okay. All right. There you go. You're gonna have a conflict with that day, Mr. Dwyer?
Yes, I will.
Okay, so, and you could find somebody to stand in for you?
What
Yes,
date
Mr.
is that?
That's Wednesday, May 6th.
Oh, May 6th.
So this is in your inboxes, and like I said, it's the usual first Tuesday of the month, except for the month of May. Okay, does anybody else have issues with that?
I just actually got this today, so I personally don't see any conflicts, but I've yet to hear back from my wife about it, so.
Well, given that it's the usual first Tuesdays, that's what we've been doing for,
Yeah, it should be fine.
forever, so, may we have a motion to accept this resolution as written? I make a motion to accept the resolution as written.
And I'll second.
Mrs. DeScala,
Yes.
Mr. Paulapiano,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mrs. Semper,
Yes.
Mr. Adler,
I abstain.
and Mr. Breen.
Okay, so the next is the singular application. Y'all can come forward here. There's an important point I want to make here, the situation that we're facing. We have a quorum here, but Mr. Breen, as you did before, you're going to recuse yourself because of conflict of interest?
Yes. I represent AT&T and therefore I'm conflicted out.
Okay, thank you. But obviously, Jetta, his presence, he attended, so make sure he gets credit for that. So that leaves a quorum of 5 of us. However, Mr. Semper did not view the video of the first application. So I'm told by our attorney that perforce allows him to hear this, but that he can't vote on it until he looks at the video after this. And so we won't be able to vote on it tonight.
Okay. Would the board prefer that we just come back at this point until January, or would you like us to proceed tonight? We can honestly go either way.
3/4 of life, we've got everybody here.
Yeah.
Sure, that's fine, I just want to make sure.
No, do not, no, we're gonna hear it.
Okay,
It's just, by law, I'm told he has to, in order to vote, he has to hear the
sure.
whole
I
thing.
just, again, if there was possibly additional members, I would be here.
Good luck.
Well, we're having a certain shortage of members. Yeah, you're gonna need to stand at the mic.
That's fine.
And I guess tonight in particular, it's gonna be very important that we all talk into the microphone because of all the plies that are going on the other side of the wall.
Sure. And if I don't get here, please let me know, so I'll try to speak up.
Okay.
Well, thank you again for your time tonight. For the record, my name is Christopher Quinn, Q-U-I-N, here on behalf of the applicant, New City Wireless, PCS LLC, known to work with AT&T. The property in question here, 76 South Orange Avenue, 2007 Lot 4, previously known as Lot 4 and 6.
Oh, he can't, he's not picking you up.
You're gonna have to talk right into the mic.
Sure.
Go ahead.
For the record, we have additional board members.
Okay, Mr. Shapiro is here. Okay, let the record reflect that Mr. Shapiro has arrived.
I was waiting next door, and they said the meeting wouldn't start till 7:30 because the kids were still dancing.
Well, we got started. Bob, were you here for the first singular meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Oh, that Bob.
All right. so we can vote on it if y'all want to. Okay.
Just by the summary, and I'll just give the board a brief summary of what's happening in transpired since it's happened. As you know, we're proposing a rooftop telecommunications facility on the subject property. Our initial application, there's two other carriers on this rooftop already. Actually, three other carriers on the rooftop. So because of that, our space was limited horizontally to be at the same height as those antennas. We had initially proposed our antenna facilities on top of the screen wall and then had proposed to enclose them. The board expressed concern about that, about the aesthetic impact of that, and asked us to go back and see if there's any way we could work outside the box and make this work, where we could put in the antennas at the same height. So we actually were able to do that. We're able to, we have 3 sectors of 4 antennas each for 12 antennas. One sector we're able to lower, place on the screen wall towards Valley Street in its existing location that's shown on the plans. Another sector we're able to look to lower and put along to the South Orange Avenue side. However, that required us to trim the sycamore tree that's right up against the building. It's actually on municipal property, so we had to go, we did obtain approval from the village to actually prune that tree. So the tree will be pruned to accommodate our antennas, and actually when we went out there, the tree wasn't in great shape to begin with, so by pruning it'll actually prolong its life as well, from our observations. So we're able to lower those antennas as well. The final side on Academy Street, there was no space within the existing screen wall, so as was suggested by one of the board members in September, we proposing to construct an extension to the penthouse screen to make it a little bit, to go back a little bit further and propose our antennas on that. We also were able to relocate our generator from on top of the top of the screening now to on the lower roof as well, so that will decrease that visibility as well. So my hope is that we've addressed your concerns in terms of what we're proposing tonight. I have 3 witnesses. What you should have received from us are revised site plans, revised photo simulations, and a revised emissions report from Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson's here to answer questions on that tonight, but again, the emissions he testified to at length at the last meeting, they're going to be below what the standards are. They're still below the standards. It goes up a little bit, but it's still well below the federal and state guidelines for standards. So I'll have him available for questions if there's any questions, but otherwise, my 3 primary witnesses tonight will be our civil engineer, Mr. Pasden, our radio frequency engineer, Mr. Arcio, and our planner, Mr. Nick Dunham.
One of the items I'm not sure that you all discussed last time, we may have kind of jumped ahead and quickly got to what we're concerned about, but I don't think you provided testimony about the basic need for this variance.
Yes, that'll be our second witness tonight.
Okay, good. I'm glad you'll be doing that. All right.
Okay. Again, we'll bring out Mr. Pasden to testify. Where would you like him to mount his exhibit to show in front of the board? Right here? Okay.
Is this microphone working?
Yes, both microphones.
Thank you.
Mr. Pazin, you're still under oath?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Pasden, can you just describe for the board, I gave an introduction to what's changed on this site. Can you just show for the board and depict exactly what we're proposing different, what's changed on the plans?
Yes, so I'm referring to the drawing sheet number Z3 that was submitted as a new part of the revised set. It was dated November 14th, 2014, revised for zoning comments. This is a view of the roof plan, which will best show what our changes were.
Mr. Quinn, would you like to offer what was submitted as an exhibit, please?
Well, if the board, this is exactly the board had. For the mark of the exhibit, we will. If not, we won't. It depends on how we.
Is that part of what was the?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't think. Is there anything different from what was submitted to the board?
No, this is the same replication of the sheets that were submitted to the board.
The revised sheets.
The revised sheets.
The revised sheets, I would like to mark, please.
Okay. We're on A2 right now.
And Mr. Quinn, what's A2?
What's A2? What sheet is that? What date
A2 is sheet number Z3, which is the sheet title Roof Plan with the revision number 2, dated November 14th, 2014, revised per zoning comments.
Mr. Quinn, I was hoping that the whole set was going to be.
Oh, okay. That's fine. We'll mark the entire set as, again, the entire set is dated revision 2 with the revision date of November 14th, 2014.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so the roof plan, basically what the changes were, as we discussed, this site is designed to have 3 antenna sectors that are basically pointing in 3 different directions. Originally, we had proposed a screen wall at the northwest, or the north corner of the mechanical penthouse that was going to house the, what is called the alpha sector, that was pointing one direction, and the gamma sector. It was going to house those antennas. We've now removed that screen wall completely and have lowered the alpha sector 4 antennas onto the actual face of the penthouse, similar to the other co-locators. And we did the same thing with the gamma sector antennas by relocating them to the southwest corner of the penthouse, again flush mounted on the wall of the penthouse. Towards the northeast, we had a second screen wall that was proposed extending above the mechanical penthouse that was also going to house the beta sector antennas and the generator. Again, we've completely removed that screen wall system. And what we needed to do to locate these antennas without extending above the penthouse was extend the southern corner of the mechanical penthouse screen wall so that we could then again mount our antennas flush to that wall so they won't be extending above the height of the existing mechanical penthouse. The screen wall will be made of a corrugated metal painted and will match the existing mechanical penthouse. So in the end it'll look just like an extension of the existing building. And then the final part of that was relocating the proposed generator. There's a existing stair bulkhead which is located to the southern part of the building that we would mount. The generator would need to be mounted on some steel framing that would span. We performed a structural investigation at the building to locate the steel that would support the generator. So we would need to put some steel framing that would span from the center of the building out towards the edge, and then we could utilize the stair bulkhead to pick up some of the support. So we tried to tuck the generator in up against the stair bulkhead as much as we could to keep that located in an area that would be as less visible from anywhere else in the building. What limited the other possibilities, we met with the radio frequency engineers at the site as well to relook at things. And like Mr. Quinn mentioned, what made it possible to do some of these things were the alpha sector antennas will require the pruning of the sycamore trees that are in front of it. That's something that we spoke with the town to get permission to do. The suggestion of the board to look into extending that screen wall. This area was needed because there is a vacant area of existing mechanical penthouse wall between the Verizon antennas on the east side and the Metro PCS antennas. However, there's an existing piece of HVAC equipment on the rooftop that would block our proposed location, as well as, so that would not allow the radio frequency signal to work there. And then the area for the sector on the west side, we were able to kind of tighten up the antenna spacing between the existing Sprint antennas and the Metro PCS antennas. The equipment itself would remain inside the penthouse as we previously proposed. Any other questions?
Is that your testimony?
Do you want to just show the elevation as well?
Sure. Again, these drawings are from the same exhibit. I'm referring to sheet number Z5, which is building elevations 2, which really shows all the work that we're proposing. You can see that we're not extending above the existing mechanical penthouse. You can see the areas where we're just mounting the proposed antennas flush to the screen walls, and where we've, if you look at the view that says looking northwest, you can see how the generator is proposed tucked up against the stair bulkhead, and that view also shows the screen wall extension where the beta sector antennas would be mounted. So that's really a summary of what our changes were and what the site would now be composed of.
And just the cable runs too are going to have to run up the top of the, on top of the screen, correct?
That's correct. The cable would be basically, it's only about 10 inches above the rooftop. It runs on cable trays. What's called a cable doghouse. It's a small box basically that's mounted coming out of the roof for the cables to just make their sweep, and then it's run in a tray across the upper rooftop to each sector. And then wherever the cables would actually come over the edge of the roof, they would be in a covered cable tray that would also be painted to match the screen wall, so it would blend in with the corrugated metal panels that are up there.
Okay, and the site will comply with all applicable structural codes, correct?
That's correct.
And again, no lighting proposed here.
Correct.
And your testimony with regard to maintenance visits and the like hasn't changed at all from last month.
That's correct.
That's all the direct testimony I have from Mr. Pasden. We can answer any questions from the board right now.
Okay, do the board members have any questions for Mr. Pasden? Okay, I have a question. Do y'all have confirmation that the town will prune that tree?
Yes, actually, I can leave the mark into evidence. I have an email communication from Sal Renda dated October 21st, 2014, and I'll read it to you out loud right now, and then I'll mark it into evidence.
Yeah, so that'll be what, A3?
3?
Okay.
And again, it's dated Tuesday, October 21st, 2014, 12:10 p.m. Mr. Quinn, I discussed your request for permission to prune the existing sycamore trees adjacent to the site with Barry Lewis, Village Administrator, and Thomas Michetti, Public Works Director. Both Mr. Lewis and Mr. Michetti are willing to allow AT&T to prune the trees as necessary so that the relocated antennae will work properly. AT&T will need to coordinate the work with the village. Please let me know if you need any additional information regarding Sal Renda.
Okay. All right, so we'll pass that around, starting down there. So, Mr. Pasden, you're adding that screen wall to accommodate the additional antenna for the beta sector. And you're putting in a standby generator nearby. Would that standby generator, with the looks of it, benefit from a screen wall around that? Or is that something you considered, or is that impossible to do given its location near the edge?
It is something that we considered. However, the difference is the way that the generator is positioned in our revised plan, and we have it up against the stair bulkhead. If we did screen that in, it would require a larger structure to basically frame around it so that you still have your clearances around all of the generator. So by the time, our thinking was that by the time you did make that extension of wall, you're really going to make a larger object up on the roof it's going to draw more attention to it than the position of how that generator would kind of fit in with some of the other rooftop equipment that is currently on the roof without screening.
Mr. Keller, do you have any comment on that?
Is it possible, looking at, I know you haven't introduced these, the photographic simulations that were prepared. The very last one shows the view from Academy and Milligan Place, which is looking at it from the building from the south. And that generator is, stands out against the stair tower. Is there anything that can be, if you think that the screen wall is a greater impediment or a greater
Greater visual intrusion.
thank you. Is there a possibility of having that generator enclosure be in a more earth tone so that it blends in with the building better?
That is something that I was trying to find out before tonight from the manufacturer, if it voids any kind of warranties, if it's painted, but I don't have that. So they could actually paint the enclosure. We could, maybe look into like some type of removable system possibly around it. Again, if it's something that a screened enclosure around that system is probably going to be on the order of, another 5 feet wider than where we show that horizontal line that's the framing right now.
Mm-hmm.
So you probably have to come down another 5 feet, and then it would actually have to extend out to the point where, right now we're showing that column in the center of the roof. That's where the structure is below. So we would be kind of extending it 5 feet down and another, out to the middle of the rooftop. So, I mean, it's something that if that's what we had to do, we could make some screening around that function.
Quite frankly, the applicant is not opposed to doing it. If the board requires it of the applicant, we will do that. It's just one of those scenarios where if you look at the building, you may see other rooftop equipment on the roof. You see the HVAC equipment up there. The generator, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. The generator may blend in more with one of those HVAC units as opposed to putting a larger screen. If the board thinks otherwise, we will screen.
Is there any issue with the doorway to the stairwell there and extending the screen wall?
No, the doorway would not be blocked. It could be worked around. In that same photo that you're looking at, you can see the cooling tower equipment in the center of the building, how that's exposed. It would be kind of on the same order of that. So that was our thinking of just trying to make it up as tight as we could to that bulkhead. But again, it's something that we could work with you on.
Well, is that something that the board particularly cares about?
Yeah, I think if there was some effort made to paint it, if you can paint it, it's hard to believe you couldn't paint it. It's just a ventilation steel shell around it, right? That would certainly help. I think this building looks a bit, I really appreciate the work you've done. The building already looks a bit hodgepodgey on the roof, and I'm not sure you're going to solve that by just extending the screen wall. I think a little color would help.
Mr. Chairman, I will say that the extension of the screen wall along the east side of the building will block the view of one of the HVAC
Right.
equipment that's already up there.
Slight benefit, right?
So there is some offset to it,
Right.
but in the alternative to putting another screen wall up there, if they can look at either getting an enclosure that's more earth tone or being able to paint it, maybe that just is enough of a softening of that generator that it's not so intrusive.
I mean, we would be willing to, a condition to say we make reasonable efforts to amend the color or to screen pursuant to the, as per the direction of the board engineer, if that would be appropriate for the board, or if the board would be willing to accept it as a condition.
Yes, Sal can work with that, but,
Subject to review and approval of board engineer?
Yeah, that'd be fine with us.
okay. And we'll put something in the resolution about painting it or tarping it or somehow
Sure.
some modest amount of screening without the full.
I mean, our only concern with painting it is just, again, sometimes when you touch something like that, it affects the
But that's just that's not like, it doesn't dissipate heat, does it?
It's an enclosure, and it's not specifically like louvers for heat, but it does have, we just have to make sure that.
Okay, so you'll find out, and so we'll throw that on to Mr. Linda.
I'm sure we can come up with.
Okay, good.
Speaking of Mr. Renda, Mr. Quinn, this email that Mr. Renda sent to you is in response to an email from you where you attached a letter and a photograph.
Yes.
Could we see that as well, or could you include that in this?
Sure, I could include that. Forgive me, the photos are black and white. I'm dealing with that. It's fairly straightforward, quite frankly. A lot of the photos are photos that I took from the photo center that was 4 by 4. I know there's drew arrows to where the trees were.
We have other questions for Mr. Paston? Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, Mr. President, just having a little trouble understanding the equipment cabinets that you show on sheet Z4. Are those within an enclosure that is on the rooftop, or is that someplace else?
Oh, no, that's inside the mechanical penthouse. So what's shown on Z4, this is actually the corner of the mechanical penthouse that's there above the roof now. So we're
Oh, all right.
interior.
But it's on the rooftop, I mean.
Yes.
That mechanical penthouse is
The
on,
mechanical penthouse is at the rooftop level, and we're inside that, so nothing would be visible.
okay. So that penthouse is part of what is shown on,
On that same page, you can see.
on Z3, is the penthouse shown on there as well?
Yes, that's the full outline here. You'll see in the center of the roof, we have this dashed rectangle. And then just above the dashed rectangle, it says existing mechanical penthouse. This whole horseshoe-shaped penthouse is that section that's extending above the roof 14 feet that our antennas are mounting onto.
Okay, so the existing antennas are mounted on the mechanical penthouse. And so the proposed ones, except for the beta sector, which is just going to be a screen wall with
Right.
standalone. Okay.
Correct, and actually on that same equipment layout, you'll notice there's some other boxed off areas here. What this is inside that penthouse, they have little chain link fence sections that house the different co-locators equipment as well. So you'll see just above us on that page, it says existing Verizon wireless equipment, and to the right, it says existing Metro PCS equipment. So we're just kind of tucking in the same area where their equipment is.
Okay, so all of that equipment is below the top of the top edge of the penthouse.
Correct.
Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Paston?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The pruning of the tree, that will be by a certified or an appropriate tree service is not
Yes,
going to be?
that was actually the conversation. When I spoke with Mr. Wren about it, he said that the village was amenable to it, but it would have to be done by a licensed, appropriate professional in a tree service. And they would and the village would be overseeing it at that time.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Paston? Do members of the public have any questions for Mr. Paston? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we'll bring in Mr. Arceo. One other point before we get to our radio frequency engineer, Mr. Keller's review letter referenced his September review letter, where there were 3 comments that we needed to make changes onto our plans. The first 2 comments we will provide to make those changes as part of the compliance plans. The third item referenced the stairs that was don't apply anymore because with the change design, there's no more stairs located on there.
Right.
So, but we will make the changes per comments 1 and 2 of his September review.
Does that make sense to you, Mr.
Yeah.
Keller?
Actually, in comparing the 2 sets of plans, number 2 is done as well. So the only one that is open is number 1 as to whether, there's any easements, and if there are, where, what are they? That's it. So that's the only open item from our first review letter dated September 26th.
So that will be noted
That
on...
would be on the revised plan.
Okay, good.
Okay, Mr. Arceo.
Hello. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you will give is the whole truth?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Neil Arceo, N-E-I-L-A-R-C-E-O. The address is 146 Winding Hill Drive, Hackettstown, New Jersey, 07840.
Mr. Arceo, by whom were you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Primera as a principal RF engineer.
And you're acting, you've been retained by the applicant for radio frequency services to implement their
Yes.
network, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you give the board the benefit of your educational background and professional experience, please?
Yes, I have a degree in electronics and communications engineering from the Philippines. I've been working in the wireless industry for over 23 years, primarily in the fields of RF network design and optimization.
And so you've been actually employed as a radio frequency engineer?
Yes.
And you're responsible then for selecting, designing, and optimizing telecommunications facilities?
Yes, that's correct.
Like the one proposed tonight?
Yes.
For what carriers have you?
I've worked with AT&T, Singular, Verizon, T-Mobile, and Sprint.
Okay. Approximately how many sites have you been involved with during the course of your professional
Roughly
career?
close to about 800 sites over the last 14 years.
I'd submit Mr. Arceo as a radio frequency engineer.
Do we have any questions about Mr. Arceo's expertise? Okay, Mr. Arceo, the board recognizes you as an expert as a radio frequency engineer.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Arceo, the applicant has an FCC licensed telecommunications carrier, is that correct?
Yes.
And that license requires AT&T to provide reliable service to its customers and public within this area, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And currently, is there adequate service in and around this proposed facility?
Not particularly, especially for indoor coverage. We have some spotty coverage in the area.
So why are we proposing a site here? What's the need here?
Okay, the main objective for this site, as you can see in this slide here, we're proposing, this red triangle. The green
Excuse me, I'm going to interrupt.
I'm just going to stop you right there for 1 second.
Yeah,
We're going to mark this as Exhibit A4.
Okay.
Mr. Quinn,
Date on the bottom.
Mr. Quinn, would you mind if we mark the photo sims that were referred to
Oh,
earlier
sure.
as
That'll
A4?
be A4. This will be A5. Well, I'm marking this as an A5. Okay. Read what this is and describe what this site is.
Excuse me, Mr. Quinn, that's not in any of the documents.
No, it's not.
Didn't you think it was important? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, okay, this exhibit shows the existing reliable coverage. They are depicted in the green area.
So,
And
so this is a map showing the existing coverage currently in this area, correct?
yes, that's correct.
And what do the dark lines show here?
These are the main road. You have South Orange Avenue and the other arteries, highways and roads in the area.
And what do all the little triangles mean? The blue
Yeah, the
triangles
blue
here?
triangles represent the on-air sites for AT&T. Currently, there are 7 sites. 3 sites are inside Seton Hall University. We have 1 site in the north, another site in the west, that's a water tank, 2 sites in the south.
I'm sorry, what did you call them?
A water tank?
Yes, there's a water tank site.
A water tank site,
Yes.
thank you.
The water tank right on the ridge by the reservoir.
Yes, that's correct.
I'm sorry, the reservation. And the site to the south is SOS Flexible Warehouse?
Yes, this is the one, the SOS Flexible Warehouse. That's yeah, 5-story building located at 219 Valley Street. And there's another site here. That's the 7-story apartment building located at 467 Valley Street. At the site to the north, that's the South Orange Tower. That's an 8-story building at 749 Scotland Road.
So right now, and this is just for one of AT&T's frequency bandwidths, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So right now, you have currently, the green areas are the areas being provided coverage for that area.
Yes.
The white areas are where you do not
these
have
are
reliable
static
coverage.
These are reliable indoor coverage, the green areas. As you can see, there are coverage gaps to the north of downtown South Orange, to the east, and to the west.
So where you particularly have a coverage gap in particular here is that 2 spots along South Orange Avenue, one to the east of the site, one to the west of the site,
Yes.
especially as you go up the hill,
Right, exactly.
as well as other neighborhoods surrounding this area.
Yes, that's correct.
And you've used a coverage tool that's standard in the industry to generate this map, is that correct?
Yes, we use ATOL. It's a standard, industry standard to produce plots like this.
And again, where you showed the red triangle, that's the location of our proposed facility.
Yes, that's a proposed site.
And the letters NYCW 1784, that's just AT&T standard
Site name.
nomenclature for this
Exactly.
particular site.
Yes,
So by point of reference, the red site's the proposed site.
that's correct.
Do you have the next map which will show the coverage being generated by this facility?
Yes.
How many sites are there now, Mr. Aseo?
Existing sites, there are 7.
Okay.
7 sites. They're represented by the blue triangles.
7 that are attempting to cover the area shown on this map?
Yes, there are 7.
There's 7 sites. I think the one to the north is actually in orange, and the one all the way in the bottom of the map is actually in Maplewood. But the remainder are in South Orange, 3 of which are within the university.
And Mr. Arceo, this is only for indoor coverage?
We're normally designing for indoor coverage.
Did that prior exhibit indicate gaps that only for indoor coverage or gaps altogether?
For indoor. There might be, it depends on the season, especially in summertime wherein you have thick foliage. The outdoor, you may have outdoor coverage in some areas, sometimes not. In winter, you're gonna be having better coverage because the foliage is gone.
Are there any
So-
specific guidelines about indoor coverage different from outdoor coverage?
Yes, for indoor coverage, our cutoff is next 75 dBm.
I'm sorry. I didn't-
It's generally indoor coverage is, it's all determined by signal strength.
Yeah.
So what signal strength is, how strong your signal is, dictates whether or not the signal will be able to go into walls, which other state are
Yes.
So
building.
in other words, if you have enough for indoor coverage, it will be enough for outdoor coverage.
Exactly, yeah, because that's the weakest.
Is that what you're getting at, Mr. Dwyer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, and again, the need is based upon the fact that people nowadays utilize their phones, their handheld devices, their tablets at home as well as at work, and not just in cars. Like 20 years ago, people were more concerned about just being able to make a call while they're driving in their car.
Yes,
So now the goal is to have people being able to maintain their signal and maintain their service while they're working from home, making phone calls from home, even replacing their phones and their landlines.
yes,
Just how the technology is driven. Correct?
yes.
So right now, this proposed map, which I'm going to mark as Exhibit A6, and again, can you just describe what this is?
Yeah, okay. On this slide, as you can see, we've run the prediction with the proposed site radiating its signal. So you can see it kind of bridged the gap to the east, to the west, and partly to the north.
So where before there was actually, it actually links and connects the two. So there's actually
Yes.
appropriate handoff between the sites.
Yes.
So this is the height of the proposed, this is the coverage that will be generated from the proposed facility in conjunction with all the other neighboring.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
And again, this is only for one of AT&T's frequency bandwidth, correct?
Mhm.
So AT&T has multiple licenses.
Right,
So they operate at multiple different frequencies.
yes, that's correct.
Each frequency has a little bit worse
Yes.
footprint or better footprint.
Mhm.
This is actually the worst footprint. I'm sorry, this is actually the best
The
footprint.
best, yeah,
Showing the least amount of coverage gap that we have.
exactly, yeah.
So in terms of at other frequency bandwidths and frequency ranges, there's actually larger
Okay, Mr.
service
Mr.
goals.
When you're doing most of the testifying, and you may be entirely accurate, I've done this so many times, but it would really be, for formality's sake, to hear this from your expert. I mean, you can lead him, but, you know, you're basically answers, you're telling them the answers, and the board's not too pleased with it right now.
We can certainly have our Sam talk.
Yeah, what would be helpful here is, you should have got this to us beforehand. I appreciate what you did on the screen wall, very nice. But, you know, now we're kind of supposed to go flip back and forth here. So what I would like you to do, Mr. Ursula, is to flip back and forth here, because you don't have a superimposition, so we can kind of see, it looks like near east, for Mr. Dwyer's sake, near east downtown has better coverage on this frequency, as well as near west, you know, going up the hill a little bit.
And Montrose.
Are these two, can you separate these two things? So I'll help you go over that.
Yeah. Well, different color, so you can see. Give a hand out.
Okay, much better.
So the map to the right is the before, the map to the left is the after.
Okay, so,
Yes, as you can see here, we have coverage gaps on the east, the north, and the west of downtown South Orange. And these are where most of the commercial or multi-story story commercial establishments are located. And you have the railway station also here, and the university here. So we'd like to kind of improve the coverage, especially on South Orange Avenue.
So the focus of this is to provide better coverage along South Orange Avenue in particular?
Yes, and surrounding areas.
Downtown South Orange and South Orange Avenue?
Yes.
it looks like some of Montrose also, as well as going up the hill into the Newstead area, some of the Newstead area is improved, along, around Wyoming. Is that correct?
Yes.
A little bit.
Yeah, well,
Also, is there another reason for capacity line service?
Yes.
That would provide benefits for the network and AT&T's customers?
yeah, for the additional side, it will also provide additional capacity and bandwidth, especially right now, the total downlink data traffic here is kind of slow. As well as internet speed is kind of degraded by 20 to 30% during the high traffic hours from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And with additional site, we're hoping to improve that service.
And also, what about commuters too, by the train? Would it benefit that as well?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so for the other board members, I'm seeing particularly improved coverage near East downtown along South Orange, the nearer parts of Montrose, Raymond, Ralston area, as well as going up the hill, just east of Wyoming in particular. There's a significant amount of coverage, and along South Orange Avenue going up the hill. Mr. Arceo, can you tell us about, Mr. Quinn mentioned that there are different frequencies, and
Yes,
are there different maps that you need
Yeah,
to show
different
us?
bands.
Or?
I only provided the 850 is kind of with the middle, and we're not, in this area, we're not transmitting or using 700 band yet, but we have 1900. 1900 is way weaker than 850. So I'm trying to show the best case scenario.
So when you say best case, you're showing the best coverage currently in the town. At the
Yes.
other
Yes.
bandwidth that AT&T has licensed to provide service, the coverage and footprint of the signal is worse than
Yes,
what's
for
shown.
1900. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so this is the 1900.
This is the 850. Yeah. 850.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is
The best case scenario.
this is as good as it gets currently.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so
that
you
is
have
the
other
scenario.
frequencies operating where the coverage is worse currently.
Yes.
in town.
For 1900, it's going to be worse, smaller coverage here.
Is this going to be the way it is for all your frequencies?
Yes.
This kind of
Yes.
coverage now with these
Yes.
antennae?
Yes.
So you have,
Wait a minute, no, just,
Oh, this is still the best case scenario?
Yes, it is.
right, but
It's
that's not the
850.
map for 1900.
No, it's not.
Right,
I
so that's,
actually
I
have
think
the
was your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have the map for 1900.
Okay, fine.
can you do before and after for the other frequencies?
Yes, for the 1900.
Okay, that would be great.
Let's put them up there. It's good to be prepared.
Yeah, you might want to talk about what the uses are for these different bandwidths, or these different frequencies,
Sure.
so that it can be meaningful to us.
So this is the
We're gonna, before you talk about it, I think we're A7? Is
Yes.
that Shadwag?
Yes.
We're
That's
gonna
existing?
label this A7 and A8. A7 is the existing coverage.
Got to speak into the microphone.
Yeah.
I'll ask you, just describe what A7 is.
Okay. A7 is the existing 1900 coverage. So as you can see, it's way.
And A8,
Yeah.
can you describe what A8 is?
A8 is the proposed 1900 coverage.
And the question from the board just now was, can you describe and put in perspective what is the coverage of different frequencies and what does that translate into?
Yes, the higher the frequency go, the less the signal would go through, especially in foliage and in other structures. So here you can see the green area is really small compared to the 850.
So what's
But
the,
AT&T operates at
Yeah,
both
multiple
frequencies.
bands. Yeah.
And
multiple.
what does is each frequency
Yeah, for
serve
19...
a certain function of the phone or the handheld device, or?
Well, the 1900 typically provides additional capacity. That's what its primary, because it doesn't go as far as the 850. So it's improving the capacity within its immediate surrounding around the site. As you can see here in Seton Hall, we have 3 sites because we have very high traffic over there.
So again, but it's also, is that data only or is that voice and data?
It's both voice and data.
Is it not a function also of the handset, the phone? Because some phones would be 1900, some phones support 1900 and 850.
Yes, well, most phones nowadays, they support all these bands.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
So for those phones that have only 1900, this is great, but
Yes.
for the newer phones,
Exactly, yeah.
okay.
Yeah. For older
Okay.
phones that are 1900 only,
1900,
then
yeah.
it's going to be.
So,
We have flip phones and stuff like that.
so for older phones, this is maybe the coverage,
This is it, yeah.
but
Yeah.
for your more newer phones, the
The
original
smartphone.
maps that you saw.
Let's say the
are what's the
smartphones.
coverage.
So if the 1900 is stronger, closer to the source, to the antenna,
Yes.
what accounts for that little island at the northwest of the proposed site on the proposed map,
The other man.
the other map, the proposed? Yeah. Why would that happen?
Oh, this is coming from the proposed site because of the terrain, and this is kind of uphill over here. So with the new site here, it kind of spill off those, sporadic signals because of the terrain.
Oh, okay, my concern would be, this isn't particularly impressive, but you're saying this is an alternative frequency. You're not going to need to come back in another year for additional antenna, are you?
No. The site we're proposing, they're already planned for the future. So we have all the carriers and antennas anticipated in the future already included there in the plan. And we just kind of activate them as the need arise.
Okay, so on this alternative frequency, I see improved coverage around near East Downtown, around the crotch of Irvington Avenue and South Orange there, as well as some improved coverage before you get to the Cameron Field area. So it's near downtown is where the main improvement
Yes,
is.
exactly. Yeah, here. Because that's where we're kind of expecting the traffic, majority of the traffic to be coming from this street here, South Orange Avenue, connecting the university to the subway station.
Is there a third frequency you wanted to show us?
700 is coming up, but not in this area. It's not yet.
Okay.
So that's
So
why.
that's the LTE.
Yes, but we also have a 1900 LTE. Yeah.
So you said you have antennas that you could activate, that you will activate as the need arises?
Yes.
Those antennas are where?
Well, they're part of the plan. Those 4 antennas per sector.
Are not going to be put online as soon
Immediately?
as possible?
No.
Well, then you better explain what the need is and why they're not going online immediately.
Well, the way the AT&T operates, they roll out the technology and the band, because you don't want to roll it out here and create an island site. So it's kind of rolled out in stages. Eventually, it's going to be rolled out maybe in a year or two.
So
once the
the
site
antennas
is
will all be installed, correct?
Yes, they will be installed.
And it's just when AT&T is ready to roll out that final
exactly.
frequency
It's going to be
range.
a matter of months. Yeah, it's not going to be turned on day one, but
But on day one, the 2 coverage plots you're showing now will be the existing and
yes, the
proposed.
1900 and 850, yes. For 700, it's coming up.
So what he's showing now is what will be on day one, as soon as they turn the system on. AT&T plans their network, not just what we need now or what we need to do to keep up, but rather, as you just mentioned, are you going to have to come back in a year The goal is for us not to have it every year, and every time we need to touch the 3,000 sites we have in New Jersey every year and file those applications, rather to plan where we are saying the next step is that we're going to roll out this frequency range, which we have a license for, but we just have to upgrade the equipment and turn it on, which they'll do. When, especially with the as the technology goes into the next generation, we'll be ready for it.
So you currently have a license for all of the antennas and frequencies that are going on the building?
Yes, that's correct.
But there's no need for those other antennas now, or for those other services?
There will be. It's just a matter of maybe a month or within a year, because they're rolling out the other bands in stages.
Well, let me just clarify, because you use the word need, which is something that
Is in your application?
Well, I think it's pivotal to any use variance application that you hear. So when you say need, I think the question is, do you need coverage for all of those areas? So even the area where you're not, we might roll out this system in a year from now, in 2016. Is there coverage there right now for that frequency band?
There's none yet. Like I said, in this area, 700 is not deployed yet.
This site will ultimately be needed to provide coverage for that frequency band in this neighborhood.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to be clear about that, because it's when you say need, I think you're referring to saying we need to put these antennas up January 1st to provide 700 megahertz?
Yes.
Coverage, which there is a need. There's no coverage of 700 megahertz there, but their plan is ultimately to roll it out within approximately a year, which would just be additional services and additional benefits that AT&T's customers would get as a result of that coverage. Quite frankly, in a practical matter, when I had done work and represented a number of carriers over the past 10, 15 years, and previously T-Mobile, their practice was to put 6 antennas everywhere, and then they just realized that, wow, the technology is changing in behind, and they went to 12, had to go to every single site throughout the entire state, tri-state area, and go from 6 antennas to 12. And just the logistics behind that and the practical aspect of it, that it was very challenging for them to accommodate all the different technologies that phones now have. So I think the planning now that the carriers are doing, they call it LTE, which you may have heard on TV ads or radio commercials, fourth generation, 4G, but LTE stands for long-term evolution, where they're actually now planning as to what happens as opposed to, oh, this device came out, we can now do this, we better have a network that is up and running. When AT&T first had the iPhone, its network wasn't really able to handle it up front, and everyone complained about their service because everyone had iPhones and it crashed the whole network. So as we're building out the network now, they're using more forethought to plan out the network as opposed to just working towards figuring out what happened a month ago and accommodating the network from there.
Could we go back to the 850?
Need to make sure you speak into a microphone, Bob. Make sure you speak into a microphone.
So, by the way, you said the industry standard developed these maps.
Propagation
what is that industry standard?
Yeah, it's the ATOL. We call it the ATOL software.
It's just the software that printed the maps out, correct?
Yes, produces these predictions, but these are calibrated with drive data, so they're pretty close.
But the data that goes into the computer that prints out the maps comes from where for the proposed coverage?
Well, the ATOL, we have the terrain information, and then we put those proposed sites and the existing sites with their configuration, and then we run the prediction, and this is what we get.
So this is a predictive software. As you move the sites from location to location, you get different coverage.
Yes.
So they decide, well, oh man, this may probably be the best coverage for this.
Yes, that's why it's, yeah. Yeah.
So what's the basis of your terrain data? Where do you get that?
Line of sight.
The terrain data, it's a digitized clutter. I'm not sure, but we're just using AT&T's database. So someone from AT&T national team, you know, they're maintaining our ATOL. It's not a standalone tool, it's a national tool. So we just log in. There's a different team that's kind of maintaining the accuracy for the clutter and yeah, terrain data.
I have a question, might be for the next expert, about the overall summary of the emissions and a statement that, you know, operating all the antennas will be less than 28% of the corresponding safety criteria. Is that from Mr. Arcio, or is that?
That's Mr. Peterson's report. You can answer that.
Oh, that's Mr. Peterson's report. Okay, all right.
We had testimony from the last one.
Yeah, and I guess my question would be, given that they're planning to put on, well, he's not up. I'll ask him that question when he gets up. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Arcio?
I do.
Okay.
So what's the difference between WCS coverage and service?
WCS, that's the fourth band. That's actually 2300 megahertz.
That's what?
2300 megahertz. That's even higher than 1900. So it's going to be even worse than 1900 coverage. But it's pretty close, should be roughly the same. But should be no better than the 1900 coverage.
So again, your testimony is that right now, at the very least, the maps that are showing up on the easels, which are exhibits A5 and A6, those maps are showing a coverage need here for this frequency band. So at the very least, AT&T will have the benefit of this coverage here.
Yes, that's correct.
Additionally, where there's even worse service in different frequency bands, AT&T, this site will give added benefit at those frequency bands to provide service to the community.
Right. The WCS is mostly for capacity, just like the 1900.
I don't know what that means, mostly for capacity.
Because we're, you know, you have almost everybody is now carrying smartphones, so that the need for data and bandwidth is going to get bigger and bigger.
So I think the question is, what does capacity mean? There's a certain number of people that are on a system. A site just can't handle unlimited amounts of calls at the same time.
Yes.
Is that correct? Can you just describe that a little bit?
For capacity, if you are using the internet, it's like, you know, the bandwidth. It's like the highway. So if you have a lot of people using their phones, their smartphones, it's going to eat up the capacity of the network. And then that's why that's why AT&T is anticipating like 4 bands to deploy to meet the demand for this high data requirement.
So each frequency can only handle a certain amount of call traffic or data traffic.
Yes, exactly.
The frequency is like opening another lane on the highway.
But the 2300 has very limited coverage, is that the idea?
It's not going to get any better than 1900. That's quite simple.
And that's just a function of how frequencies travel. Higher frequencies travel.
Yes, it's going to be.
Higher frequencies travel shorter distances. Lower frequencies travel farther.
Exactly.
I have a question.
Mr. Shapiro.
Yes. How will your expanded capacity for AT&T compare with the existing coverage for competitors such as Verizon?
I don't have information for Verizon.
Yeah, unfortunately the carriers don't trade or exchange that kind of trade information with one another. It's like trading competitive information.
So you can't tell me whether this will bring it onto a par with Verizon or whether you're above that now?
What I can tell you is that Verizon already has a facility on this rooftop and AT&T doesn't. So I would suspect, and I don't think you can say it, but I would suggest it would probably make us at a more even playing field with
Yeah.
Verizon than where we are now. Is that safe
Yeah,
to
well, they
say?
have 4 antennas too, so most likely it could be.
So right now, it would be keeping up with Verizon, but
Yeah.
again, without being able to actually,
So at this point, you're at a disadvantage to Verizon.
Yes, especially in this area here.
Okay, so this will even the playing field.
Definitely, yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Adler?
Referring to page 12 of your report dated June 30th, in the second full paragraph, last sentence, it says, "The cumulative exposure contribution of all the existing carriers, including AT&T, is 493.4% of the public exposure limits and 98.68% of the FCC's occupational exposure limits. These limits exceed the FCC's limits." What does that mean?
that's actually, first of all, Mr. Peterson's going to testify to the emissions issues that was contained in that report. And actually, because we relocated the antennas, I think that your report, the Site RF compliance report dated June 30th, is no longer valid anymore.
So have you updated your report, Mr. Arceo?
Yes.
No, we've not submitted an updated report, Mr. Arceo, because we have Mr. Peterson's report, which we were submitting in lieu.
Well, but it's right here. I mean, it's here. And it looks like it's something I should be concerned about. So I'm asking about it.
If you have a question on emissions, we're going to have Mr. Peterson testify.
I understand, but it's in Mr. Arceo's report. He signed it.
I understand.
So I'm asking him.
With all due respect, I'm also telling you that report is no longer valid. Any numbers in that report are no longer valid. When you relocate the antennas, the numbers change. When you lower the antennas, the numbers change. And Mr. Peterson can answer that question. So you're asking him a question about a report that isn't correct anymore.
So was it correct then?
With the previous design, your numbers were accurate, correct? Yes.
So that paragraph is now contained in what report? For the reconfigured antennas.
Can you refer to me as to what paragraph you're looking at?
Page 12 of Mr. Arceo's report, it says Primera, June 30, 2014. 6, predictive modeling analysis. It's paragraph 6.
Yes.
The third paragraph on that page. I guess it's the third full paragraph. Third paragraph. Second sentence.
Good. I can have Mr. Pearson testify to that, since he's the person who's testifying as to emissions.
And we have a report that deals with this same subject matter, but for the new antennas?
Yes.
Which one is that?
We submitted it. It is the report prepared by R.C. Peterson Associates, LLC, dated November 12, 2014. And right above it, it says revision of 26 September 2014 report. We were at the meeting previously. I had marked that into an exhibit, the September 26th report, and the board had asked me to submit it prior in advance of our next hearing. So that's what I've done. Again, when you move the antennas and lower them, it affects the numbers. So the numbers changed. So we had revised this report according.
And I guess I can ask Mr. Peterson what paragraph of his report compares specifically to this paragraph on page 12 of Mr. Arceo's report.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I apologize. When we were here in August for completeness, the board told me that one of the concerns, especially with respect to the public, was also having emissions and making sure that we had an emissions person to testify. In that case, Mr. Peterson has such a vast area of expertise in that field that we thought it would be best and just more appropriate to bring him to testify to. So that's why I just want to keep him being the emissions area expert, because again, he's had decades of this experience of handling those exact issues. So I just think it's more appropriate to have Mr. Peterson testify.
Do we have other questions for Mr. Arceo? Any from our experts?
No, sir.
Just a couple. In looking at, I guess it's A5 and A6, I'm sorry, that are on the board right now, they're illustrative and they're helpful. Although I will say it would have been helpful to have that information in a document where we would have the data so we could better evaluate it, the board could better evaluate it this evening. But that said, I wondered if you could just summarize in plain terms the inadequacy of the capacity that currently exists and what the condition will be after the installation of these additional facilities on the site.
Okay, so for, like I mentioned earlier, I don't have the traffic stats, but from the traffic generated among the 7 sites here, we experience a degradation of 20 to 30% in downlink data throughput. So as low, especially during the high traffic hours, from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And that kind of triggered, in addition to the coverage, kind of triggered also to justify to propose a site here. So with this new site, we're hoping to improve that degradation, maybe by 10-20%. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Adler.
So, Mr. Arceo, so in the areas on the existing 850 megahertz coverage map, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being no service and
Okay.
10 being the best possible service, what do you have in the areas that are not green?
Well, the areas we're not green, we cannot really guarantee the indoor coverage here. That's what this means.
You have unreliable service.
Yes, unreliable. But for outdoor, it's still, sometimes you have, sometimes you don't, depends on the time of the year.
Again, unreliable.
Yes.
Which would be a 4 on a scale of 1 to 10?
Could be, yeah.
Okay.
5.
And after the antennas are up and running,
Yeah, as you can see here in the proposed 850 coverage,
that'll be a 10, 100% service?
nothing is really guaranteed, so I would say maybe 8 or 9. Again, I'm talking on indoor coverage here.
Mhm.
You would see a significant improvement in service.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Any other questions? Members of the public have any questions for Mr. Arceo? Thank you.
Thank you. There were some questions for Mr. Peterson, so I will call him up and ask him to answer them to the board.
Mr. Peterson, you're still under oath?
Yes.
Excuse me?
The exhibit is blocking the podium.
Okay.
Sure.
Excuse me, Mr. Peterson, state your full name for me, please.
Excuse me?
Please state your full name.
Oh, Ronald Peterson.
Peterson, thank you.
You want the address? 170 Fairview Drive, Bedminster, New Jersey.
We swore in Mr. Peterson last time, I believe. So you're still under oath?
Yes.
And Mr. Peterson, you did submit a report that was submitted to the board entitled Site Conformity Assessment with FCC Rules and Regulations, 47 CFR Section 1.1 310 et cetera, dated November 12th, 2014, which was a revision of the 26th September 2014 report.
Yes.
So that report, I believe, was Exhibit A1, which we marked in September, and this is an updated version of that report. And that report has been submitted to the board, and everyone has a copy of that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. In summary, previously with the design, the site conformed with all FCC and state emissions requirements.
Yes, it does.
And now when we lower the antennas, that changes the numbers, but we still comply with all applicable emission standards. Is that
Yes, it
correct?
does, yes.
Okay. I will allow Mr. Priest to answer any questions or welcome any questions from the board.
Mr. Adler.
So what will the cumulative exposure contribution of all the existing carriers, including AT&T, be as a percentage of the public exposure limits?
On a roof or where?
Well, first on the roof.
For the 4 antennas, the highest is about 0.8, 0.9.
My question is the cumulative exposure contribution of all the existing carriers, including AT&T.
You can't add them together because the exposure is local. If the antennas are on one side of the building, that doesn't add to the ones on the other side. You have to treat each one separate.
You mean this statement made no sense?
No.
Well, it made no sense.
It does not. In fact, if you look on the next page, you'll see little blue spots next to the antennas. That's where the fields approach the occupational limits. But you look at them, they're just local. You can't add the ones from one side of the building to the same maximum value on the other side of the building. You can't do it. It's incorrect.
So the report that previously was making over assumptions.
Yes, it was a very conservative assumption.
Well, is it a conservative assumption or it didn't make any sense? Those are different things.
Well, people that do safety analysis make very conservative assumptions. I wouldn't do it for this. What I would say is when this site is up and you walk around on that rooftop with a meter that measures the power density as a percentage of the FCC limits, you won't find any spot where the average value is above the FCC limits.
How about anywhere in the world besides the roof?
Well, it's a lot lower. The limits are lower, and the percentage of the FCC limits off the roof are still within the limits for the general public.
So as you move further away from the antennas, horizontally further away or vertically further away, going down to the ground, moving further away from the actual facility,
well,
the emissions tend to go down.
Yeah, as you get further away and also as you get further closer to the ground. If you look at the report that I submitted, you'll see that there are different values. We did the levels at 6 feet above grade and at 16 feet above grade in a surrounding area. And in both cases, the combined value for all the AT&T antennas, all the antennas that are up there, all the AT&T services that would be used in the future are below the limits for exposure of the public.
How far below and what limits?
Well, it's in a report.
Okay. Tell me.
Okay. Okay, at 6 feet above grade.
Excuse me, what page are you on? What page are you on?
I have the table separate.
Page 10.
Just what table is it?
It's,
What's the title of the table?
Yeah, that's
Table 2A within the report.
Page 10. The page numbers are listed at the top.
Thank you.
It has the levels for AT&T as a percentage of the FCC limits, and it has the levels for the other carriers as a percent, and then a cumulative value for all of them added together.
Okay, so this would be 6 feet above grade, walking on the sidewalk around the building?
Anywhere, walking on the sidewalk around the building, blocks away from the building. This is the absolute maximum it could be.
Well, so that's going to be right near the building, obviously, because
It's
it's,
lower near the building, because most of the energy is propagated out, but as it gets away from the antenna, it decreases in intensity very quickly.
So that this change in Mr. Arceo's paragraph isn't based on the fact that the antennas are now lower, is it? I mean, he's just way, way off.
no, my understanding is that he's looking at the exposure on the rooftop, if I'm incorrect. Mr. Arceo's, this 500, because I saw this too, Mr. Adler, about the this is what Mr. Arceo writes on page 12 of his report. The cumulative exposure contribution of all the existing carriers, including AT&T, is 493.4% of the public exposure limits and 98.68% of the FCC's occupational exposure limits. These limits exceed the FCC's limits. And then I go and look at the graph on page 13 of his report, and it looks like he's showing the roof of the building, and it's, if you're standing and hugging one of the antennae, you're going to get this massive exposure, but I'm not sure. So maybe you're comparing apples and oranges. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, the ones on the rooftop are also on the table, but they're just local. They're right under and a few feet out from each antenna, and the antennas are separated. So if you have one antenna and you have something that approaches the FCC limits, and you have another one 12 feet away, the two aren't going to add together the maximum in front of one plus the maximum in front of another. It's like taking two searchlights, one pointed this way, one's pointed that way, and you say the cumulative light is the sum of these two. It's not.
So when you say, Mr. Peterson, on page 3 of your report, the combined maxima for the AT&T antennas plus the antennas now located on the building will be less than 28% of the corresponding safety criteria.
Yes.
That refers back to your graph on page 10, table 2A, 27.4%, which is 16 feet above ground.
Yes.
Okay. And so,
that's 6 feet above grade is lower.
yes, so 16 feet above grade. Okay, so maybe we're making too much. 16 feet above grade, does that mean if I'm floating in the air 16 feet right on the perimeter of the building? I guess what Mr. Adler and I would be looking for is a person walking on the sidewalk right around the building or as close to where they're going to get the maximal exposure. It's going to be less than 27.4%.
Oh, yes, very good. What happens is the antenna has a vertical beam width of about 10 degrees. So the further away you get from the antenna, the larger the area of the beam. But also the further away you get, the lower the signal strength in the beam itself. You double the distance, it goes down by a factor of 4, so it reduces very quickly. For most antennas, if we've made a lot of measurements on the single monopole towers where you can walk anywhere around the base of the tower, and the highest level is usually at 50 to 100 or 150 feet away from the base. But the antennas on a rooftop, some of the energy is reflected off the roof upward, so there's very little that gets downward around the building, and very little that gets into the building.
So again, the 16 feet above grade, where would that be in relation to the antenna, this 27.4%? Where would a person have to be?
Window across the street.
We use that as a typical of what it would be outside the window of a second story of a two-story building or so.
Across the street, maybe?
Yeah, it could be up at 16 feet above grade, but that'd be outside the building, not inside. It's much lower inside.
All right, so it could conceivably be, they could face this 27.4% on the street right around the building, potentially. And that's as high as it would
You could
get.
probably find a place 16 feet above grade at some distance from the antenna where it would,
And that would be with all of them operating at the same time
all operating at the same time and maximum power.
and pointing in the same direction?
Yeah.
I mean, but you're saying that isn't what happens
Well, all at once for one sector.
for one sector?
Yeah.
Okay, so this could, that's your conceivable, that's what Mr. Peterson is saying.
And one thing I just want to point out too, on page 10, the question before is discussed, we discussed the LTE 700 frequency band that we would be rolling out in approximately a year. That was included in your calculations as shown on the first line item on the proposed AT&T services.
Everything that AT&T plans to use, at least that we know they plan to use, is included in the report.
Could AT&T use something on those towers other than what's in your report?
You'd have to ask the radio frequency engineer. We just got the information from them that if they do operate at 700 megahertz LTE, plus 850, two different services, plus 1900, two different services, plus 2300, if they did operate all of those things, that's what the calculations refer to. So as time goes by, right now, when they first start up the site, it's going to be far lower than anything in the report. But as they add services, it can approach. And again, this 27% is really an overestimate. We make so many conservative assumptions in the calculations that we have to, flexibility of doing because it is a safety calculation. And over the years, I've made measurements on all kinds of sites, and we never come anywhere near what the predicted values are.
Okay, and again, to address your concern, Mr. Adler, if I look back, Mr. Arceo's report where he mentions the 493%, the caption at the bottom on page 13 says figure 2, % of FCC general population exposure limit roof level. Right, so I think that's the difference that we're seeing. He's citing the roof, as I understand it.
Yeah, but it's 493% at roof level. We don't know what it is below, I guess.
Yeah, and the roof is a restricted area where there's warning signs and all sorts of things. So you use the occupational limits, not the limits for the general public. If you're going to add up something.
Okay, so, but is it clear, maybe Mr. Quinn would know, is it clear that AT&T is not going to do anything on these antennas other than the frequencies that are in Mr. Peterson's report?
Mr. Arceo can answer that too, but I mean, the short answer is this: AT&T has licenses issued by the FCC to operate at certain frequencies and only those frequencies. Unless if the FCC issues a new frequency band to AT&T, they will only operate at those frequencies.
And we assume that they're going to operate at all those frequencies when we do the calculation.
Sure.
If they don't, there are enormous fines and penalties against carriers, so there is no way they will operate outside of their licensed frequencies.
If any of these antennas shift their position, maybe if there's a super windstorm or a tremor, could that possibly affect the emissions?
Yeah, if the antenna sort of fell over pointing down, but then the carrier would certainly know that happened because of the interruption in service. But still, the ones on the roof, if they did point down, the signal would bounce off the roof and go up. So very little gets absorbed by the roof, or certainly very little of it, if any, gets penetrates the roof. Most signals in a building reflect off other things that come in the windows.
We have other questions for Mr. Peterson? Our experts?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, members of the public, do they have any questions for Mr. Peterson? Nope, thank you.
Next one, Mr. McDonough testify to the planning aspects of this application. You can take I'll stand here.
sir, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you'll give to this board is the whole truth?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name and address.
Yes, hello, my name is John McDonough, that's spelled MC, capital D-O-N-O-U-G-H.
Mr. McDonough, can you give the board the benefit of your educational and professional background, including any licenses that you possess?
Sure, my education comes from Rutgers. I am a licensed professional planner here in the state of New Jersey. Also a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, which is a national certification. I'm not testifying in the capacity of a landscape architect this evening, but I also do hold that license as well. This is what I do. I testify in front of boards like this on a nightly basis and also in front of courts. I have testified in front of this board. Last time I was here was for the Gateway project, the transit-oriented development that I see just down the street.
Excellent. Mr. McDonough has a license signed letter.
We have any questions for Mr. McDonough? Okay, the board recognizes you as an expert in planning.
Mr. McDonough, can you describe to the board what you've done in preparation for this hearing, and then also give your opinion with regard to any of the variances being requested by the applicant?
Sure. Our analysis starts with a look at what's on the ground right now. So we've visited the site, personally walked the surrounding properties, particularly when we're dealing with height. We take a look from every vantage point, and we prepare those photo simulations, which are included as part of the packet, showing the building as viewed from 4 different vantage points. We've reviewed the application as filed. We've reviewed the application as amended based on the interaction that the board has had with this applicant. We've reviewed your zoning ordinance, and we've reviewed your master plan as well. Again, you do have photo simulations that show visual impact associated with this particular use, and I'll walk the board through those as I go through my testimony. But in terms of the zoning considerations here, we are in the B2 business zone, which is certainly commerce-oriented, allows for a wide variety of uses, including, interestingly, central telephone exchanges and public utilities, things that may not be 100% on par with what the applicant is doing here, but certainly like uses in terms of operational and physical considerations. I agree with your planner, Mr. Hamilton, in his report that the relief required here is a D1 use variance to allow a wireless telecommunications facility, which is not expressly permitted anywhere here in the town. I also agree with Mr. Hamilton that D6 height relief is required related to that faux panel that's being extended across the front of the penthouse to accommodate those antennae. Bearing in mind, you do have an exemption clause in your ordinance for rooftop appurtenances that extend 10 feet above the rooftop, and that faux wall will actually be within the 10-foot threshold and not exceeding that. And as part of that exemption clause, you also do have language that includes exemptions for antenna, which is specifically what this structure is intended for. In terms of the justifications for the use relief, we turn to the SMART versus MSR case, which directs the boards to apply the SECA balancing standard. And again, I agree with your planner, Mr. Hamilton, that that's the standard that applies here whenever we're dealing with wireless structures on existing facilities. Per the SMART case, the possession of an FCC license should suffice that the use serves the general welfare. You've heard that our operator here, our carrier, does hold an FCC license, so the positive criteria are presumptively satisfied, and that goes towards Purpose A, the promotion of the general welfare under the municipal land use law. In terms of the 4-part test that's envisioned under SECA, it's a simplified or streamlined test. We don't have to go through the more enhanced proofs that would be required, as this board would see for a pure D1 use variance related to the Medici case and the reconciliation of the omission of the use from the zone. So running through the 4 parts, part number 1, identify the public interest at stake. You've just gone through a thorough analysis with our RF engineer as to the need for this use at this height, at this particular location, at those various bandwidths as well. The RF testimony demonstrates that there is inadequate capacity and coverage at this particular location, and the property itself becomes particularly suitable to fill that void and to fill that lack of reliability in the area. I thought there was a good analogy that one of the board members asked for with respect to a level of service 4 now being improved to a level of service 8, I think puts it into good layman's terms, although that may not be the true technical term to fill the need here. Also, the site is particularly suitable by virtue of the fact that it already does accommodate wireless telecommunication facilities, for that there are 3 carriers here already. This would be the 4th. There is room on the site within the penthouse and on the penthouse to accommodate the antenna and the equipment that would go with it. And also, as we've said, there are other public interests that relate to the positive criteria, including the enhanced communications, the personal and professional productivity that would occur here. Bearing in mind this is a business corridor and it's important to business productivity to have that capacity and to have that coverage. Also, we see the advantage of enhanced 911 service, and our statistics tell us now that there were over 400,000 enhanced 911 calls made on a daily basis throughout the nation. So certainly our cell phones have become important when we're dealing with emergency type services. My involvement with this carrier, with AT&T, goes back to the days of 9/11. We saw an abundance of these sites being built out. So again, there is a nexus, and we know that with Sandy, our cell phones became important as well as the power was going out. Second part is to identify the detrimental effects that would be associated with this use, and I think the board has given this application a good scrub now through 2 hearings, one in terms of the physical condition of the use that's proposed here, and also with respect to health impacts and emissions and the like. In that regard, the 2 things that we typically look at with this land use are that, number 1, it is functionally innocuous. We're dealing with what is essentially an unmanned facility, not going to generate significant population, not going to generate significant traffic. Again, a functionally innocuous land use, as low intensity as it gets from a functional standpoint. No heavy water or sewer demand, no noise, no vibration, no glare, no odors or smoke associated with this particular land use. And again, given consideration to the fact that this is an area that is zoned for activity and for use. On the other side, we look at the visual impacts, and that goes towards our photo simulations. And I think, Mr. Chairman, now is a good time to walk the board through those 4 views that have been presented. And I don't know, Counselor, if I need to mark a new set. What we've prepared here is consistent with what you have in, I believe, what was identified as A4. We've just mounted them on boards.
Yeah.
Mr. Jarman, would you like me just to mount the labels and mount the exhibits as A4? Or would you actually mount them as marked as further exhibits?
Are they exactly the same as what's in A4?
In size, they are, yes. They are exactly the same size. They're just mounted on boards.
So we don't need to mark them.
Okay, I'll say those.
Mr. McDonough, these prepared by Mr. Carlback?
These photos were actually taken by Mr. Carlback, my colleague. I've walked the site. I've walked each one of these locations.
Do they accurately depict the site?
They are accurate depictions of the site and the simulation of what is to be built here. So our first set of photographs, again, we've labeled them 1 and 1A. The 1 would be the before, the untouched photograph of existing conditions. The 1A would be the after condition, and again, with the simulation of the panels being added onto, again, flush-mounted panels that are going to be added onto the penthouse. We're looking at what I would call, from this vantage point, the west facade, and we can see from the photograph, for reference purposes, we'll call this the gamma sector. We have what appears to be 5 panels, but there are actually 4 panel antennas, 2 on each side, and then the one down the middle is actually a cover over the coax cable. So they're all colored and structured to look similar, and again maintain what I'll call that vertical geometry that we're seeing with the windows and the like across the penthouse.
One thing I just want to point out too is when you look at the other antennas in these photo simulations, the existing carriers antennas, the vast majority of those aren't painted at all. They're actually the natural color of the antennas, correct?
That is correct.
So AT&T's antennas will be painted to match the screen wall.
Yes, that's.
So they'll even blend in more into the background.
Correct, and so therefore, we're looking to maintain coloration that's consistent with the backdrop of what we're attaching to. That's 1 and 1A.
Now, these photo simulations don't show the pruning of the sycamore trees, correct?
That's a very good point, and they do not show the pruning of the sycamore trees.
Is it possible that you could draw that on there, on this exhibit?
If I may have a moment just to consult, I think I might be able to do that.
But the goal of the pruning is the goal of the pruning to make sure that there's no foliage in the line of sight of each of the antennas?
Yes.
Zero foliage?
Yes, so the antennas right now, if you notice, there's a, if you notice, there's a spacing from where the antennas are. The antennas are spaced either to the left or to the right of the antenna.
To the tree.
To the tree.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
do not go, the other carriers avoided that. So in looking at that, the only way we could fit it is in that area where the tree is.
Right.
And otherwise, in fact, if we're to question if the antennas are moved further up to the left side of the picture, if you're looking at the photo simulation number 2, there was blockage from the library across the street. So the only way to get up and actually get a view of Scotland Road was to put the antennas towards that right side of the building where there's no antennas right now. What we had talked about with the village in this conversation was AT&T be willing to work with the town in any way they want us to do to work with that tree. They want us to replace it, they want us to prune it. Mr. Renda told me that they certainly want us to replace the tree, they want it to be pruned. And that's what the village preferred. So again, we'd be working with the village to make sure it be pruned. I'm going to ask you just in 2 because I think it's a more level view, that just to show a line around the pruning of the tree. I think that's probably the clearest one.
Can I just ask you?
No, it's going to be just kind of around it out.
Okay. I'm going to use this so else.
Sure. And again, our conversation with the village was we'll work with you with whatever you need us to do.
Buried in all your crap here.
I should have done it.
Yeah.
You have all your stuff. Unless somebody took it from you.
So what are we talking about, like 10 feet off the top kind of thing?
10
or-
feet or so, approximately.
And I think the best thing to do with this exhibit is to walk it around the board, but I'll start on the easel.
Okay. Now,
And again, as my letter indicated, the actual top of the tree is hollowed out anyway. So,
well, there are 2 trees, right?
yeah, the one that's closer to the building is extended a little higher up. The one that's a little bit further towards the corner, it's very small, only a couple branches.
Okay, so we're looking at the photo 2 along South Orange Avenue, and that's the main tree there that's sticking above the roof line.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so that's going to have to be chopped off significantly. But as we saw from the email, Mr. Rinda, representing the town, agreed to it.
And Mr. Chairman, for the record, the photographs number 2 depict the north facade. We're looking at, again, 4 panels on the penthouse, and then what appears to be a 5th panel down the middle, which is also the coax cable cover as well. And what I'll do is just pass around so the board can see where that pruning would take place. The intent is to maintain what I'll call the lollipop shape of the tree, to maintain that canopy, but we do have to shave some branches off the top to achieve the coverage that we need.
And again, the reason why we approach the village around this is that the trees are actually located on the village property. So it's actually the property line, that's not owned by our landlord.
You gotta use
That's
the
owned-
microphone there.
That's not owned by our landlord, that's actually owned by the village itself. So that's, that little strip of land between South Orange Avenue and the building is village property.
And what you're looking at in number 2 is going to be the alpha sector. And I would just like to point out for the record that I did mark in black marker both the existing and the proposed. Of course, the existing is what it is, so that's an error that I marked the left side.
Bob and Bob, do either of you have Mr. Rinda's email that was passed along? Or did,
I don't think I saw it.
No,
I think it's stopped.
haven't seen it.
To supply a copy, Mr. Quinn?
Yes, there was an electronic email.
Okay.
And again, if the board were to put a condition on it saying that our approval is conditioned upon the village approving this, then that's an acceptable condition. So we would be able, no matter what, we wouldn't be able to proceed until that choose for negative.
Mr. Chairman, may I proceed with the third?
Please.
The third set of photographs are looking at the east facade. This would be the beta sector. Again, now we're just dealing with 4 panels. We don't have the coax cable at this particular vantage point. Again, color-coded to match the background. And then finally, the fourth. The fourth photograph takes us to the south facade. We have no antenna being mounted. We do have the standby generator, and I thought Mr. Keller had a good question about the colorization. That was the first thing that I had inquired about as well, whether they can be color-coded or whether they come in different colors. I've heard that the applicant is amenable to explore that, to minimize that visual impact. But that is on what I would call the fourth side. That is not the side that is facing the South Orange Avenue corridor. It is on the back of the building that essentially faces the parking lot that's associated with the building. So from a visual impact, in terms of the public realm, that has the least visual impact at that particular location. Those exhibits talk to the second part of the SECA balancing. The third part looks at mitigative measures or identifying ways that the applicant may mitigate some of these visual and other impacts. And I think that has occurred as part of the first hearing where we had a higher structure, and through the impact or through the interaction with the board, those structures were pulled down. I think the applicant has responded, and in that regard, I think that's certainly a condition that will ameliorate any detrimental effects. Also, again, the condition that we've talked about with respect to the colorization of the standby generator as well to match is another condition that may be imposed. Last part of the test is the simple balancing, looking at the overwhelming positive aspects of this application and the need to fill that FCC mandate of seamless and reliable coverage. The applicant is doing that here, improving service for the citizens of your community and the people who come here, balanced against very unperceivable, innocuous impacts from a visual standpoint. Again, based on the input of the board, we have an applicant that has responded. So it's my conclusion from a planning standpoint with respect to the use relief that the applicant is seeking, the overwhelming weight is on the positive side and the SECA standard is certainly met. With respect to the height is really inherent to the use here. And in that regard, we're looking at something that is necessary to meet the RF requirements again. In terms of the positive criteria, all those use benefits carry forth. On the negative side, the detriments are not substantial, and we look to the Grasso standard in that regard and the purposes of having height controls. This added height here does not create any additional density, does not cast any negative shadow effects, bearing in mind that that structure is recessed from the edge of the building, 28 to 48 feet from the edge of the building. We're not looking at a penthouse that's right there at the edge of the building itself. So in that regard, certainly not violating any of the intent or purposes of height control under that Grasso standard. Not blocking any scenic view sheds, and again, reminding the board that rooftop appurtenances are contemplated within 10 feet of the actual roof line under 92-200G of your ordinance. So in that regard, I believe the height relief is also warranted. That is the essence of the planning testimony before you. It's my conclusion that the variances can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and the surrounding properties, which are predominantly non-residential in character. We do have some residences that are somewhat remote from this location, to the extent that the visual impact will certainly not be substantial. And I do believe that this promotes the intent and purpose of your master plan to have a vibrant and progressive downtown. Again, as a co-location facility with no physical changes, we're also looking at meeting the federal co-location law 6409A. In that regard, I believe I can rest.
So in 6409A, that talks about when you're co-locating on a facility like we're doing here, we're putting antennas on an existing structure where there's already other existing antennas, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And that legislation that was adopted by the federal government says that, can you describe, I guess, exactly what that legislation
Again, what it says is that to the extent that there are no substantial physical changes, that would meet the intent and purpose of that co-location law.
and thus such a co-location is required to be approved?
Correct.
Okay. And in your opinion, the proposed facility is not a substantial change to the structure of the building?
Very, very modest changes to the overall mass and scale of the building.
And it's consistent with what the FCC has determined are what defines as a substantial change. Nothing's going above the height of the building by 20 feet. Nothing's extending beyond the width of the building.
That's right. We're matching the line of the height of the building that's there now.
No ground disturbance that's outside the area of the building?
No, the equipment is entirely contained within the rooftop structure that's presently there.
Okay.
I just ask one, just for clarification, you mentioned a couple of times 92-200G as if it applies here, but in fact it doesn't apply because the penthouse is more than 10% of the total area of the roof.
Okay, I was actually saying it doesn't apply because we're dealing with a separate use. These are not antennae that are accessory to the principal structure.
But so you're not right, so you're not.
I'm not saying it applies, I'm just reminding the board that mass is contemplated on the rooftop.
Right, okay. So you're not saying you don't need the variance or that you don't really need the variance? You need the height variance?
Yes.
Right.
And I think he's saying that that section of the ordinance is further supportive of our height variance.
That's where I'm going, yes.
Are you through with your testimony now?
That concludes my direct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do members of the board have questions for Mr. McDonough? No questions? Okay, do members of the public have any questions? All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, just one or two questions? Okay. Mr. McDonough, just to clarify a couple things. With regard to the pruning of the tree, what's your opinion on any detrimental effect to the neighborhood with respect to that pruning operation?
I don't think the impact on the neighborhood would be substantial. I think that the shape of the tree, the canopy, again, that rounded form of the sycamore tree can be maintained and will not have a substantial visual effect. To the extent that I think the agreement with the town is that if necessary, the tree would be replaced with a lower version. I believe that's my understanding.
Sure, we'd be willing to work with the town in whatever they require. I mean, it is the town property. What was conveyed to us initially was that they prefer that, again, after looking at this and taking a couple weeks to get back to me, the feedback was we prefer to have this pruned. And we think that's a much better solution than to replacing it. Again, if the board wants to put a condition saying that if the village decides that it's more appropriate for us to replace the tree in lieu of pruning, we'll replace the tree.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is, and if I heard Mr. O'Reel correctly, he indicated that after these antennas are installed, you're going to see probably a 10 to 20% improvement in coverage in the area. And my question to you, John, is that sufficient to support the positive criteria that you outlined in your earlier testimony?
Yes, it is. And I think the key word is that the service is unreliable there now, and this is necessary to bring that service up to a level of reliability. So, yes.
Thank you.
Then, Mr. Hamilton, just to reiterate, I mean, from the maps, what you saw was that there's areas of the Montrose section, areas of the downtown, areas of South Orange Avenue. So whereas that might be a percentage of the entire town we're getting improvement, you are getting significant areas in the town. I think even Mr. Reeves said it's a significant portion of the town. We're going to see a better footprint and better coverage being served.
No more questions.
Good. Thank you. Okay. You have any closing statements?
Sure. I mean, I guess at this point, I appreciate the board's time and consideration. I don't know if you want to open up to the public for any comments or whatnot for the application, but when that's finished, I can have a closing statement or have any further discussion with the board.
Is there any comments from the public about the application as a whole, whether for or against the application? Okay. None.
Thank you. I guess at this point in time, I know the board has had a lot to absorb tonight. We've had this extensive discussion about the change in design. I know you just saw the propagation maps for the first time, which was expressed that, would have preferred to have them previously. I apologize for that. There were no submission requirements. We would have provided other if it was a requirement. There was extensive testimony about the emissions. We talked about how we redesigned the site to improve the aesthetic impact of the proposed facility. We've talked about how we're changing the height, reduction of height. We're proposing the antennas similar to what's there from the other carriers. We've proposed our generator towards the rear of the building and are willing to work with the board engineer in terms of mitigating any visual impact of that. In terms of the benefits of this site, again, we have license from the FCC to provide coverage to the community. Right now, as you see, that it's not sufficient. We have holes within our network. So this site will better serve the community once it's up and running. And AT&T will be able to better serve the community once it's up and running. So it's going to improve coverage in downtown South Orange. It's going to improve coverage along South Orange Avenue, which is a significant corridor through the township. It's going to improve coverage to the north in the Montrose section, up the hill as it's going towards the west, and it's going to link a number of sites together to provide a handoff for the overall network. Additionally, when people from South Orange are commuting back and forth to work, or when the train comes through in the mornings and the evenings, and there's a huge amount of people that are now on their iPhones, on their BlackBerries, trying to get coverage and service to do work on the way back and forth, or just listening to a book on tape on the way back and forth. The site's going to be able to serve that and serve the community at the same time. So that's what the benefits of this site are, and that's why we're here proposing this site. In terms of negative, it's primarily the aesthetic aspect of the site, which I think we've worked extensively to mitigate. The board had certain requests. We did what the board asked. We couldn't come back in November, quite frankly, because we were in discussions with the village about the pruning that tree. And after going back and forth, and again, this is where the current village municipal offices are. They were right there. They certainly didn't just give us a rubber stamp. It's right outside the building. They looked at it before they came back to us, and I had approval from 3 different members from the village to confirm that it's appropriate for us to prune this tree. In terms of all the other aspects of the application, we've had extensive testimony about the emissions, that we're going to comply with all applicable standards, that we're well below the FCC public safety, and as well as the state standard as well. I guess since we only have 5 members that are voting tonight, I just would ask the board, is there any questions or concerns we haven't satisfied for you tonight? If there's anything we can give you additional information, if you'd like it, we will certainly provide it for you. But I know we have only 5 members voting, and it requires a unanimous vote. So with that being said, if the board thinks that we should give them something else, or if there's something that we didn't touch upon tonight, we can certainly accommodate you. We're willing to do that.
Well, we can vote next month if you want to.
Members are voting
but
right now?
we've got 5. We've got Mr. Descala, Mr. Parlapiano, me, Mr. Shapiro, and Mr. Adler. Are there any particular concerns the board members have?
Should we have our conversation?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's basically our conversation here. Look, they can. I got a sense from the board that despite Mr. Adler's questions, and I understand his concerns, I shared some of them, there was that conflicting test, or at least the reports on the emissions. I don't get the sense from the board so far that people are going to vote no on this. Remember, the applicant has the right to request a full 7-member panel. So, where are we on the board? What are your thoughts on this? Anybody ready to turn it down in particular?
I don't plan on voting against this.
No, I think it's well argued and strong case.
Mr. Adler? Okay. So, so we're in the discussion phase now. I think there was a nice Sika balancing test that stated by Mr. McDonough, done better than I can do. I'll try to restate it, so that was nicely done. I very much appreciated their listening to us and modifying what they originally proposed was to add greater height, and now they're just extending a wall so that the height doesn't get any worse than it already is. I think that's a substantial improvement. That's the kind of cooperation that I appreciate with applicants who are willing to.
Yeah, and I would say I always hate to see. I mean, there isn't much foliage around that building. You hate to see the trees chopped off like that, but at the same time, those trees are, I think, a bit overgrown for the site. And frankly, I'd probably want to talk to Sal about if the city had a chance to put some consistent lower trees that look better with the building. Maybe that's a good opportunity to do that. So I as much as I hate to see the trees cut off so much, I don't think it's a big negative on this application.
Yeah, I think it's going to look like garbage pruning that tree that way. I'm willing to condition it, though, depending upon, I think Mr. Quinn said it, depending upon what the town says, whether they accept the pruning or whether they might want a new tree. And we just leave it at that and see what the town decide what to do on that, rather than force a decision one way or the other.
That's right.
But I'm not willing to stop the application, the benefit to the public for one tree. That would be silly. As far as the colorization, that would be another thing I would ask the applicant, if possible, to find a beige, colored generator or paint it if that's possible, if that doesn't void the warranty. And they've agreed to do that. Those were the conditions. Were there other conditions that people were concerned about to add to this application? I think those were the two.
Mr. Chairman, just the one item in our September 26th review letter number 1 under technical review. That should be conditioned that Mr. Quinn, I believe, agreed that they would provide that information.
About easements?
Yeah.
And that will be in the final plan?
Yes, that's correct. We have no objection to that condition.
All right, so, and let me just go down briefly, just basically to repeat Mr. McDonough, so we say it as the board about the pros and cons. The need is there, telecommunications, wireless communications, both cell phones, data is a ubiquitous productivity tool that people use nowadays, almost as regular as water and electricity. And they've demonstrated that they have holes in their coverage along the populated area of South Orange, near downtown, particularly along South Orange Avenue and near Montrose areas, and also up towards Wyoming. That's why they would need to put antenna on this location. It's a suitable site also because it affects those areas, improves the coverage in those areas, and we've approved other carriers there in the past on this particular site too. This is more for the public's benefit. So it's been demonstrated to be a suitable site. As far as the negative criteria about emissions, Mr. Peterson, I think, gave clarifying and acceptable testimony that the radio frequency emissions within areas that people would be walking and traveling would be under FCC limits. So I'm reassured by that. Also, the negative criteria about the height, well, it was also mentioned that this is a recessed area where they're going to be locating the antennas. It's not right on the edge of the roof, so that visual intrusion is somewhat less. As far as mitigation, they have, as we mentioned, mitigated the visual impact by not adding additional height for antennas, but adding an additional panel that's at the same height. And I think we all agree that that's a much better alternative. And then we've mentioned those three conditions. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a motion here while I'm talking, unless anybody else really wants to do it. So I make a motion that we approve the application with the three conditions that the applicant has agreed to. And if I state it wrong, correct me, Mr. Quinn. One would be that on the final plan that they would state any easements that are applicable to the property. Anything else on that? That's it. Okay, number two would be that the approval would be conditioned upon the town, them agreeing to either prune or replace the tree as required by the town. Correct? Number three would be they would investigate whether they could purchase or paint a generator to match as closely as possible the background color of the penthouse. They would look into that. So with those three conditions, I recommend that we approve this application.
I'll second that.
Mrs. DeScala?
Yes.
Mr. Parlapiano?
Yes.
Mr. Adler?
Yes.
Mr. Shapiro?
Yes.
And Mr. Reeves?
Yes. All right, very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, so now the board will go into closed sessions. We're not technically adjourned. We're going to come back in probably about 10 minutes or so. Where are we going? We could step outside the building. I step right outside this door right here.
The applicants and all of their people are about to leave. There's only one member of the board.
Yes.
Member of the public.
Yeah. Okay, we're still live. We're still live here, so please don't talk in here.
We'll find it.
We can either do it right here. Well, you can turn off the sound, can't you, if we have a closed session in here? Okay, why don't you put up the banner at this point? We're in closed session now. Okay, we're back in session with just a couple quick items before we end the meeting. One is to announce the next meeting is January 6, 2015. That's the first Tuesday in January. I also wanted to thank Mr. Adler for 6 years of great service to this board. His term is expiring at the end of this year, and he's elected to not request to be reappointed. Mr. Adler has done a great job on this board. He's been a consistent attendee, and he's been wonderful, particular skill at understanding what the ordinances are and applying the law and sticking to what the law is, even maybe when sometimes he didn't particularly agree with the law. He understood that our job is to apply the law in this quasi-judicial fashion that we're asked to. And that's a temperament that is well suited to this board. And as such, you did a great job, Bob. We really much appreciate it. And we're going to miss the fine work you did. Wish you good luck.
Thank you.
All right.
I miss your attention to detail. I don't know where we're going to get that.
Is there anything else that we need to mention before we adjourn for the evening?
Only that the items discussed in closed session will become available to the public upon conclusion of the litigation.
Okay. Anything else? Oh, finally, to anybody who's watching this evening, we now are short 2 alternate members. We're looking for 2 alternate members to join this board. And so anybody can contact me, or they can contact, I guess, Mark Rosner, who's head of the Planning and Zoning Committee of the Board of Trustees. I'd be happy to speak to anybody who's interested. We're looking for somebody, A, who can show up and show up on time. Punctuality is important. People are paying a lot of money for these variances, and traipsing in here whenever you want doesn't cut it. So showing up on time, and a temperament that's maybe modestly obsessive and oriented to detail, and willing to apply the law. It's not a political body per se. Obviously, we have our own judgments and values. They show up from time to time, but we're sort of like a court. And as such, we try to take the law as it is and apply that in a fair manner. So that's who we're looking for. All right, with that, I'm going to end the meeting. Thank you all.